the Pentagon can do. They can make them go away.
From Maelstrom to Manat, Boston to LA, there are people asking questions and they will not go away. But what has been seen might not be what it seems. The government's shadows dance and deceive. From Maelstrom to Manat, New York to LA, you can't get the picture if they're pale or they're gray. But what we have seen might not be what it seems when the government's shadows dance and deceive.
You can advertise your business on Night Dreams Talk Radio, and you will be heard worldwide. Why not contact us at nightdreamstalkradio@gmail.com.
If you would like to hear Night Dreams Talk Radio on your local radio station, let them know. Tell them to check out www.nightdreamstalkradio.com, and thank you.
Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark wants to give a big shout out to all the truckers that listen to our show. You're listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio After Dark with our host, Gary Anderson.
And that is me. We're talking about, well, UFOs of unidentified objects over Las Vegas. Steve, are you still with us?
I'm still with you.
Well, you know, what type of cameras are you using nowadays to film these unidentified flying objects?
Yeah. Okay, well, obviously when I began, all I had was my cell phone. And I tried to hurry up and save up enough money to get a good HD digital camcorder. That's how I began. And so, you know, at that point, then I had a nice new camcorder HD. And about a year into it, there was a gentleman back east in North Carolina. Can I say his name?
Yeah, go ahead.
His name's Tony Ivy, just a super nice guy, and he's very knowledgeable about cameras. He was very interested in my videos that I was catching just with that, camcorder, digital camcorder. And he said, listen, I've got about 6 or 7 night vision cameras here. He goes, I don't even use all of them. Why don't you let me send you one? And I'm going, oh, no, no, that's fine. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's that I'm proud or whatever, but I grew up where I don't ask anybody for donations or anything like that. And, you know, I didn't want to accept that. And he just would not take no for an answer. So he sent me this night vision monocular, Luna Optics, night vision monocular. And Gary, that just turned everything on its head, because when I started using that is when I began to see objects that I never saw before. And I'm not talking satellites, things that are straight above your head. I'm talking about things going on over the Las Vegas mountains and the Sheep Mountains that appeared to never have anything going on. And that area is also where the southern boundary of the Nellis test range is. So I think that this thing was catching test craft. But anyway, when the more time I spent doing it, the more I realized these are running around like they're actually not airplanes or helicopters. They're like UFOs. And so I've been documenting this now for years. Nobody's ever asked me to stop. You know, I've called the news stations around here. I've called Nellis. All the stories you get are kind of more ridiculous than even saying they're UFOs. I mean, that first UFO I told you about, my son he called Nellis and he said, what was going on there? And he goes, they said it was a single jet fighter doing maneuvers over the city. The thing is that video showed this thing hovering and going forwards and backwards, and I don't think jets can do that.
Well,
but anyway, I've learned that,
Steve,
I just take...
Steve, they would never take a military aircraft over a populated city and do maneuvers.
No.
Because the risk of something happen is so great, like a crash, how much, how life would be lost. So for them to say that was totally ludicrous. But you know what? The stories that when you talk to the military or any of these, FAA or any of this stuff, the stories they tell you, they just want to pass you off and get you off the line fast as possible.
Right. So, and it's surprising how many people you run into that are that way, no matter who you call. Yeah, you could call TV stations and you get that kind of stuff. They treat the topic as if everybody that's watching are in the third grade, and that's not the way they should be treating, that topic, because it is real. And that's my whole point about everything that I do, is that I'm not trying to say that these are aliens or that they are military or black projects, because I don't know, but I said at the end of the day, if you look at this technology that's right here on video, you're going to see something that goes far beyond anything that we knew that we have. And that's what keeps me motivated, and that's what keeps me interested, and I'm not a conspiracy guy. It's like I say, I am a veteran. I'm proud to be an American. I'm not trying to say our government's doing anything wrong. I mean, any government having any kind of technology like that is going to keep that technology secret. But there's a point too where you have to know what your tax dollars are being spent on when you hear that we have this multi-trillion-dollar deficit. And you just got to know that maybe that some of this technology is a little bit better than what we're being told.
Well, but don't you find it, Steve, that it's really strange that our president, going back almost a year ago, jokingly says, he wants to create a space force, and then him and the vice president actually created a space force, was part of the Navy. But why would he do that? Unless something is going on that they're trying to break it to the population very slowly. This, like the leaks of the video from the Nimitz and all this other stuff, is all coming out in little bits of pieces. But for every little bit of this information that's coming out, there's disinformation over here, too, at the same time.
Oh, of course. Yeah, well, I'm sure you know who Gary McKinnon is.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the Scottish hacker. Who found evidence by hacking into NASA and the Johnson Space Center that we had a space fleet going back to when Ronald Reagan was president. So what space fleet are you talking about? A new one or the one that we supposedly had even way back then?
Well, you know what?
And
I'm going to butt in. I'm going to say something. And I've said this, James, and don't laugh. Okay, I've said this numerous times on the show. I grew up as a kid. My dad... Well, he was in World War II and then Korea. When he was waiting to be shipped back home from Korea, he met this guy waiting to be discharged also. Well, the guy turned out to be, later on, after his name was changed. You remember the Rockford Files?
James Garner.
Right. I didn't realize that was my dad's best friend, or very close friend. And when I was growing up as a kid, he would come and visit my dad up in Seattle every summer, and he would spend about a week or so or less or whatever, and him and my dad would do things. I didn't know who he was, and then one day I was watching a TV show called Maverick, and then I said to my dad, I said, "Is that your friend?" He goes, "Yeah, that's my friend." And then next time he came over, because I was always intrigued, I was older at that point, but I was always intrigued with Ronald Reagan. And I said, "Do you know Ronald Reagan?" And he laughed. He goes, "Hey, he's a real close friend of mine." I said, "Is there any way at all, you could put me in touch with him?" Back then, Ronald Reagan had a show for young people. Once a month, people could call up and ask the president a question, and he would try to answer it. you had to call him. Well, all of a sudden I get this phone call, and it's from the White House. And I'm on national radio. See, I think it was CBS at the time. It was carrying it. And I asked the president a question. Well, a week later, I get a phone call from the White House. Ronald Reagan's calling me. And I talked to him like 2-3 times in probably about a month time frame. And then I moved on, and I think he naturally moved on. But one of the conversations I had back then in the newspaper, especially the Seattle Times, all the major newspapers were talking about the Soviet Union, United States. There was always this thing about war, nuclear war, what could happen. And I was concerned. So I asked Ronald Reagan, I said, what is going on with Star Wars? Is that going to protect us against the Soviet Union? And he did his little kind of sigh and breath, and he came back. And I remember him saying, well, it's going to protect us against them out there. And when he said that, it kind of like didn't really hit home. But then years later, I kind of like remember our conversation, and then I realized he wasn't talking about the Soviet Union. He was talking about them out there. And I know he made a speech in front of the United Nations about what would, being prepared in case there was ever an alien encounter. So it just makes me wonder, yes, I think Star Wars, and maybe we were and did have some type of technology. The technology we see is not probably the state of art of technology that's out there, believe me.
Well, your impression was spot on. He sounded just like Reagan. Well, what about the story of Ben Rich? Do you know about Ben Rich? I'm sure you do.
Yes, but if you want to tell the
he
listeners...
He was the Lockheed Skunk Works CEO, and I think he died almost 25 years ago. But he oversaw the stealth fighter, all these other projects, had just amazing career, but always denied, all of the fantastic stuff until he was on his deathbed. And that's when he just delivered a huge thing when he said, that and this is not going to be exactly correct, but he said our military has already been to the stars and back. He says we are 50 years ahead of anything you could even imagine. And that's 25 years ago. So if that is, and why would anybody do that on their deathbed? There's nothing to be gained by saying that.
Yeah, there is.
Hiding that your entire life.
There is, Steve. You know what it is? It's called letting it out. Something that you've been holding back.
Yes. Actually, you're right. That's the one thing to be gained. And, I believe the man. I just seen things here now that I made. My wife tells me I'm an anal about things, and I can be. It served me well. Being just an adult and growing up. I had a good life. I've done well, and all I did was go to junior college and take little classes that didn't even have anything to do with each other. It was things that I was interested in, but. I excelled at any job that I ever did. And, I looked at this like, hey, this is a job. I'm going to make it a job. And if I'm going to just catch a UFO, I'm going to catch a bunch of them. And that's what's happened.
Well, how often do you go out there looking to capture? And do you go days where you don't see anything?
Yeah. Well, when I began doing this and when I made it, I invested in the tripods and the camera, and especially when I got the night vision, that's when I began going out every night, except for, just like really bad weather, illness, vacations, something like that. I got where I didn't even know what's on TV or anything anymore. I just would put in all my time outdoors. And I was going every night, and I did that for 3.5 years. And so in a 3.5 year period, Gary, I want to say I did for sure 1,000 nights of doing that. And in 1,000 nights' time, you can gather a lot of material. But after that, I did kind of come up